McIntyre of the Concord Bridge.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This is a great opportunity to sort of share a bunch of different stories about how we're getting local journalism back. It's sort of a community of nonprofits helping each other, guiding each other to get the, replace what Gannett and Gatehouse has essentially eviscerated, just getting rid of all local coverage. The Concord Journal, I think now, has maybe a story once a month that is Concord-based. Most of it is house sales in Billerica or what is happening with the Chelmsford football team, and I don't know why they even print. I suspect that they have some long-term advertising contracts that they have to exhaust, and then maybe we haven't heard anything about what their plan is. But back in November of 2020, so this was 6 months into COVID, a couple of us were grousing about we really need to do something about getting some local coverage. And we had a journalist in town, David Ropeek, who was very interested in starting a digital news source. So I brought him over to have a very chilly conversation in the garden of a friend, Peggy Burke, who used to run the Concord Museum. And Peggy and I had done a lot of fundraising, so we thought maybe we could help him. Peggy and I both wanted to have a paper, but David said, no, that's way too expensive. We can't do that. After about 6 months of back and forth, we got onto David's board, his nonprofit board, and he promptly fired us because we were too bossy about how to raise this money. So we said, okay. So we sort of licked our wounds and then connected with another Concordian, Kate Stout, who had run a newspaper in Nantucket for about 20 years. So we thought maybe she could give us some ideas. So after lots of conversation, we sort of looked across the border at the Carlisle Mosquito, which is a paper that's been going for about 51 years. I think they're celebrating their 51st birthday now. And I used to be a selectman in Concord, and the only way to find out what was going on in the Concord Carlisle High School was to read the Carlisle Mosquito because they had extensive coverage. So I started subscribing. And then I was drawn to its coverage of their Board of Health, their select board. I mean, it's really deep coverage of what's going on in essentially a small town. It's delivered free of charge to everybody in Carlisle. They're supported by advertising and donations, and they've survived. They've survived during COVID. They survived during 2008, the recession. They've gone through many different business cycles, and so I thought maybe we can persuade them to start covering a little bit of Concord news. Let's I'm sure they were thinking camel's nose under the tent, but just to have 3 or 4 stories in each issue that was Concord based. So through the winter of, I guess this was 2021, we were talking with Carlisle and thinking, how could we could help them with fundraising because they're a very lean operation. They're mostly volunteers with stipends is how they describe it. And they started to think they were going to lose their local voice. I mean, Concord would overwhelm them. So they said, in the kindest way possibly, you have to do this on your own. And we're thinking, find a printer, hire an editor. How are we going to do this? Do we really want to do this? This was in February of 2021. And then we decided, well, let's see, let's try. So we developed a business plan. The idea about delivering free of charge to everybody in Concord, that would involve about 80, well, we print 9,000 copies every week. We deliver 8,600 or 8,700, and then have a lot of these outside the office. It's all free. So the idea was to get it to everybody in Concord, because Concord had, the attendance at town meeting was plummeting. We were having uncontested elections. We voted, I was telling Jonathan, we voted our largest capital project ever at the height of Omicron. There were 400 people at town meeting, and it was a $110 million project. And our debt, we still have a AAA bond rating, or whatever, the highest, but our taxes, thanks to this vote that was sort of cooked in, our taxes, the Finance Committee now estimates, are going to be going up 7.9% every year for the next 8 years, which adds up. So, this was all happening with nobody knowing. And with all the old people saying, we're not going to go to town meeting. We're being told to stay at home. This is Omicron. So they put, microphones in the parking lot so people could, but nobody, it was in the dead of winter in January. So anyway, back to why we needed a paper. Our idea was we need to connect all of Concord. And in the course of doing some research about what the town needed, we had a couple of forums. First one was at First Parish in Concord. Everybody masked. I think we had 150 people show up, and I was saying to Jeff, we didn't really know how to advertise this, because the Concord Journal, nobody was getting the Concord Journal anymore. So I went to the Main Streets Market to get their sandwich boards, and we put out notices of all of this, and we got a lot of people to come, and a lot of people who were in a position to help us financially, which was good. So we were sort of counting noses around the room. And what came out of the 2 meetings that we had was that people wanted a paper if we could figure out how to pay for it, because they wanted to be able to reach the children, children who don't walk around with their eyes on a phone, and seniors who aren't, they don't live on their computers, or they still consume news. They like to consume news slowly and over time. So let's see, what else came out of the forum? Oh, that Concord is, we think of it as being very homogeneous. There are over 40 different languages spoken at home in Concord. Everybody speaks English in schools and in their work and whatnot, but we have an incredibly diverse population that sort of lives in its own little pockets. And so the paper would be a way of reaching everybody and making the letters to the editor available to everybody. And it's turned out to work pretty well. So we figured that printing and postage, we have a nonprofit rate for the post office, adds about $160,000, $170,000 a year to the budget. We figured we could do that. We calculated this is a 16-page paper. We sometimes do 20-page, 24-page, 28-page, but 16 is the basic. So we calculated our advertising rates based on, what would half of our expenses cost? We've got little ones, big ones. Zoratius, or Atias, I don't know how you say it. He was the first person I went in to sell ads to. And he said, I'll buy a full page for a year, and I'll also be a founding sponsor and whatnot. I said, no, sir, we can't do that. We're only selling 12 weeks at a time, because we want to make sure everybody else gets a chance to do it. But he's been completely loyal. But so we figured advertising at $18 a column inch, with a minimum of 2 column inches. and that would cover half of our expenses. And so the task was to figure out how we could raise the rest of the money. And through, real serendipity, we got some large gifts, some small gifts, and between April 2022 and I think September, we raised almost $1 million to have 3 years of operation in the bank so we could get through the next COVID, the next pandemic, get through the next recession, so we could hire the newsroom, rent the office space, have a contract. So we had assurance that we could launch. And then we launched on October 21st, 2022. So we've been at it for 1.5 years, coming up on 2. And we're still mostly friends on the board. There were about 6, well, we had to take some breaks. There was one 2-week period in the summer of 2022 when we just couldn't say anything nice to each other. So the young guy on our board, Andrew Pedar, who's a global fintech, I don't know what he does, but he's great. He said, we need to take a vacation for 2 weeks. So we took a break and came back in a much more peaceful fashion. But so let's see, we had Kate Stout, who was the newspaper person from Nantucket, Peggy Burke, Concord Museum Executive Director, Jack Clymer, who helped do the fundraising for the Beatty Center, our fitness, our town pool, Alan Lightman, who lent his name mostly. He's a fabulous guy, but he's also got a lot on his plate. But he agreed to be part of this. Alice Kaufman, who's president of our board, who's just great, and she wanted to be here, but she's with grandchildren. So that's the 6 of us, and me, 7. And then we've added 2 more board members in the last couple of months. So let's see. Oh, also, Betsy Levinson, who was a reporter for the Concord Journal for years and years and years, she agreed to be our founding reporter. And she worked essentially without pay for about 5 months before we launched, just getting all the freelancers in place, figuring out what the pattern of the year would look like. And she's just incredibly organized. And she's still involved, although she's threatened to resign. Not threatened. She said, it's time for me to retire. I think she's 78. Time for me to retire, but she's still at it. I guess that's enough. That's probably more details than you really wanted, but it's been a roller coaster. We've just hired, because we've been, operating through the skin of our teeth. We just hired a CEO, Miley Houlihan, who lives in, she was a member at First Parish in Concord. That's how we knew each other. She lives in Sudbury. She's had a lot of publishing experience on the business and reporting side. And so we're paying her much more money than I'm comfortable with, but I think she's paid for herself instantly in terms of solving problems that we didn't even know that we had. So that's the new movement, and our budget is essentially more than doubled. So the question is, are we going to be able to keep our fundraising success going? So our advertising is doing just fine. I think our fundraising will be doing fine too, but it's an iffy business. You just don't know who's going to wake up in the morning and say, I need to give the Concord Bridge $100,000. And those people exist, but we need to be there when they're having that thought. So I'm a very conservative budgeter, so I don't like to make projections over our past experience, because I think we got a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning, and I don't know whether people are going to continue to appreciate the fact that the paper comes once a week. So I guess I've been listening to myself long enough, and I'd love to answer some questions.
Talk about your staff. What are the staff? They paid? Are they?
Oh, they're all paid. They're all paid. We have a couple of columnists who are not paid. They're Ken Anderson, who you all probably know. He lived in Concord all his life, and he used to admire Russell Baker, and so he writes the Concord Observer, so about growing up in Concord and hockey teams and basketball teams and whatnot, and with lots of detail. And we have another friend, Larry Delamar, who says, oh God, heaven help us when he gets to puberty, because he's writing all the details about everything that goes on in Concord. But he is not paid. We have a news editor who moved to Concord last July, who's fabulous, and she covers the select board and a number of other boards and general, and she organizes all the freelancers. We've got 3 part-time editors and reporters. We've got a production manager, and I was telling people that she's really the secret. I mean, she lays out the paper and deals with all the helps the advertisers design their ads. And she couldn't be older than 32 or 33. She's got 2 little kids at home, does everything remotely, and she's why the paper looks so great. She grew up laying out papers for her father in Chicago. He had a bunch of Chicago newspapers. And we've got an advertising salesperson who has lived in Concord a long time and is great. We've got a website guy who lives in Arizona. Don't get me started on that. He's retired from New York, but he's very good, but he happens to be the president of our board's brother's best friend. So we haven't developed a conflict of interest policy yet. So I think that should be coming up. But yes, we do have we have a payroll now of about $560,000, which will get up to $650,000. I mean, it's nutty. But we don't pay benefits. We would very much like to, but we're paying well for the news business now because we want to have good people. Yes?
So what was the feedback that you had gotten from the Concord residents?
Well, we did our first annual appeal starting last October, and we've got a love letter file about like this, because everybody sends in their check with long letters about, you especially liked the fact that we're covering real estate transactions now, or my children steal the paper, it comes on Friday, take it up to their room, and they read the police log to see if they're in it. Or families that have readings of the police log at Friday night dinner. They go around the table. The feedback has been good. I think I have a friend who said, well, until I got the Concord Bridge, I didn't realize how boring Concord was. But the feedback has been pretty good. Yes, Kim.
Could you talk about how you handle coverage of local controversial issues? The one that I'm aware of is Warner's Pond, and also the naming of the school, and also the cost of the middle school. So how do you
Well, there's a lot of give and take in the letters to the editor. So we try to be completely neutral, independent. I mean, we can't be completely neutral on things like climate change or something that there are certain facts. But for Warner's Pond, there is a great division in the town about whether we should return it to a stream or, dredge the entire thing at the cost of $9 million, which, is just not, that's a lot of money. So we've been accused from both sides of tipping, having our thumb on the scale. The school department was very upset that we published all of the details of the school expenses. But that's what we're supposed to do. They said people will get confused about those details. Well, no, I don't think so.
There's a lot of smart people
Yeah.
know about how
So when I was doing some fundraising, there were a lot of people, there were 3 people that I really thought would support us, and they said, "Oh, you're going to be way too liberal for us. We can't, And I said, but then you don't need to support us, but you can just decide after you read it whether that's in fact true. And we've gotten contributions from each one of them since. So that's nice. But we try very hard to be neutral and impartial, not necessarily balanced. I think that there are some things where balance doesn't make any sense. But
exchange is getting the same criticism. Oh, you're too liberal.
Right.
You're biased in a liberal direction. In the case of the Concord Bridge, on what basis did they make the inference that you would be too liberal?
by looking at who was on the board. So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you have a digital edition also?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We've got, that's what this guy in Arizona helps us with.
Did you start with that first?
Yes. No, we did it at the same time. We did digital and print at the same time.
So Kim,
Yeah.
could you compare her path and the Acton Exchange and where the Acton Exchange is headed?
Well, let me start by saying that we share the goal of pulling our town together, having a more informed information ecosystem that everybody in the town can access, and we share also the commitment to being fair on controversial issues. We've also just started a letter column where opinion is, that's our first foray into opinion. So those are sort of the commonalities. We only have a online edition, and that's because of the very high expense of print. Acton is not as wealthy a fundraising target or an advertising target as Concord, and so we are running on a much lower budget. And so our editor-in-chief and some of our key staff would love to move to a print edition, but it's not on the foreseeable future. So I'd say that's the biggest difference. The other difference is that we followed the model set by the Boxborough News, actually, another paper, also in the same local information ecosystem, of basically journalism first. Before we had an organization, before we had a nonprofit corporation, before we had a budget, we just started, volunteer writers and editors started sending content to the existing distribution forum, which was the Action Unlimited. So the Boxborough News started that model, and we followed in their footsteps. And so basically, that was already a paper publication being distributed to households in Acton. And so we just started sending them articles, and which they hadn't had previously. Previously, they just had announcements. So we started sending them articles, and we developed a volunteer set of editors and writers through the Acton Exchange model. We did that for about 6 months, and that got us some practice in writing and editing with volunteers. Then we, on November 1st last year, we started a website. This is a simple website in a blog-like format. Initially, it was running on the personal server of one of our volunteers, and eventually moved it over onto we did a small GoFundMe fundraiser and had enough money to have our own, web domain. And So then we started publishing this blog-like format, and that recruited more writers, more editors. You guys may not know that your very own Jeff Brown sitting over there is our business reporter, also a volunteer reporter. So.
Yay!
At actonexchange.org. He covers businesses opening, businesses closing, businesses with new developments, and so. And then then we had a local designer offer his expertise to design a more classy-looking website. So he contributed his time. We paid his developer. So we paid the hands-on WordPress guy, but we didn't pay for the design services. And so on April 9th, we opened, after a huge effort of volunteers, to recategorize all our articles and make sure all our articles had photographs, and huge volunteer effort. On April 9th of this year, we opened the new website, which is done through WordPress box theme. You can see it. actonexchange.org. So it looks like a newspaper. It's got a front page, it's got a masthead.
It looks great.
You know,
It looks great.
And we, at that same time, we spun up a weekly newsletter. Also, again, following the footsteps of the Boxborough News, they had done that before us. So it's basically a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to by email. And what you get is basically an email on Fridays that has a link directly to each of the online articles. So, so that was our model. So, yeah.
How much of your costs are supported by advertising?
Zero. We don't have any advertising
Don't have
so
any.
far. So online advertising is much less lucrative than print
Yeah.
advertising. So, print advertising. So there's a real chicken and egg thing. By printing, you gain access to a whole bunch of new funding sources, including, display advertising that advertisers like, and legal notices, which is another thing. So print gets you new income, but it also gets you very new expenses. And we haven't even seriously dreamed up a strategy that will let us make that conversion. So we are looking to hire our first part-time employee, and that's so much more high priority than getting to print. Basically having some people whose day job it is to make this happen help our volunteers.
Well, do you rely on volunteers to actually distribute? Then you're delivering it to all these homes?
Oh, well, the post office delivers, the post office gets, the printer drops off all the copies of the post office, and they deliver it to every household and every business. So I send out subscriptions to out-of-town subscribers who pay $100 for that. And I also deliver to our libraries and our coffee shops and whatnot. I'm looking for somebody to take that over. So everybody on the board volunteers in one way or another. So
you're pretty much up and running? And
Yes.
you feel that you're a stable business model now?
I think, well, we'll find out. We'll find out. I mean, we've grown faster than any of us expected. So there's a lot of pressure on us to match the amount of money that comes in from advertising through donations. So I think we can do it, but it hasn't happened yet. So the fundraising cycle is usually in the fall. We'll find out.
Are you going to be part of Newsmatch?
No.
No.
Is all of your support, philanthropic support from local sources?
Yes, we have a small grant from the Knight Foundation, small, but yes, it's all local. We've got about 1,000 donors. We had 67 donors who gave us the pre-launch funding, and what we're trying to, so we have about 10% of the households in Concord are supporting us, which I think is great. I mean, for direct mail, that's a very good rate of return. But we'd like to get up to, 20, 30. Some people send us $10, which, the widows might. We will always take. It's just, we want the broadest base possible. but we also need the tip of the pyramid.
Do you have the concept of sustainers, like in public radio, where a person signs up to, $10 a month for?
Well, no. Through the annual appeal process, I think we will get to that. We're going to start, we haven't published how much anybody gives. We've just done it alphabetically to thank our donors. But I think this coming year, we're going to thank the people, we give special recognition to the people who are giving 5,000 and over, 1,000 and over, 500 and over. So just to make sure that people who think that they're big deals in town understand what being a big deal in town is. That's a little bit of public shaming.
Is there any kind of emerging, organization of this sort of local?
Yes, there's the INN, the Institute for Nonprofit News, who are very helpful in getting, they will lend you their 501c3 as long as you give them 7% of the money you raise, which it's a sponsorship, yeah. They will help you get accountants and lawyers and printers and everything. They've got model policies for nonprofit news, which are very useful. And they essentially, we became a member in April 2022. They give you guidance, but at the same time, they're supported by revenues that you can also get on your own. So some people on the board are happier with their services than I am. But it's a great organization.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I think, based on the breakfast today, if either one of you want a food critic, Jeff would be a good one.
I think that
Too busy being the business guy.
Yeah.
well, you can wear many hats.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, yep, thank you.